Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that takes that pile of sources you've got and boils it down into something clear, something useful. Today, we're diving into a problem that, well, literally eats away at the livelihoods of farmers and landowners. Picture this: a single deer. Now imagine it eating up to 2,000 pounds of forage in just 1 year.
2,000 pounds. That's,
E-
that's a huge amount of plant matter.
Exactly. And if that plant matter happens to be your crops, your income source, well, you've got a serious and seriously expensive problem. So our deep dive today is all about how to cut down on or ideally prevent crop damage from wildlife. We're focusing specifically on deer.
And we're drawing heavily from a really insightful article called How to Decrease or Prevent Crop Damage from Wildlife, which comes from Bees Camp Leasing.
Right. And our mission here is to, unpack the real impact deer have on farm fields. Sometimes it's kind of hidden. We'll look at the strategies landowners often try.
And then we'll get into what the source suggests is a truly effective and maybe more importantly, a sustainable solution.
Okay, let's dig in. Let's get to the root of this problem and then look at those solutions. So we've got that number, 2,000 pounds of forage per deer per year. That's already a lot for one animal. But what happens when you think about the bigger picture? The sheer number of deer out there. Does that just blow the problem completely out of proportion?
Oh, absolutely. That's where it gets really fascinating and frankly quite concerning. The estimate is that the U.S. is home to something like 25 million white-tailed deer. 25 million. So you
Wow.
take that 2,000-pound appetite and multiply it by millions. You start to see the immense, just constant pressure on vital crops. We're talking alfalfa, canola, corn, sorghum, rye, soybeans, wheat. I mean, these are staples.
Yeah, the foundations of our food supply, really.
Exactly. It's a scale of impact that's hard to grasp without those kinds of numbers.
And it's not just how much they eat, right? The source talks about how they eat. It calls them concentrate selectors.
Right.
What does that actually mean? And why is that feeding style such a big deal when we talk crop damage?
Yeah, that's a key point. Being a concentrate selector means deer naturally go for the best parts first, those nutritious, tastiest bits. Usually that's the tender growing tips, the newest leaves. Think of it like picking the choicest items off a buffet.
Okay.
And in a balanced ecosystem, that's actually fine. It can be sort of symbiotic. The plant gets pruned. It stimulates regrowth. Sometimes it comes back even stronger.
Yeah.
It's just part of the natural cycle.
So it can be, okay, when does it flip? When does that natural browsing turn from, a little pruning into actual destructive damage for farmers? What's the tipping point?
Right, that's where the population density comes in. That
Yeah.
symbiotic relationship. It completely breaks down when you have too many deer. When their numbers go beyond the biological carrying capacity, basically, more deer than the land can naturally support without damage or even just beyond what's culturally acceptable to the people living and working there, like farmers. That's when the trouble really starts. They run out of the good stuff, so they're forced to eat further down the plant. They eat older, tougher parts, and that puts way more stress on the plant. It takes longer to recover or maybe get stunted permanently or it just dies. And that means real yield losses.
Okay, so if you're a landowner walking your fields, how do you know for sure it's deer doing the damage, not, say, rabbits or insects or something else? Are there specific signs to look for?
There are. The source gives some clear clues. The main thing is the type of damage on the leaves or stems. Look for ragged, uneven tears.
Tears, not clean cuts.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Deer don't have upper front teeth, upper incisors, so they can't snip cleanly like a rabbit. They bite down, and they have to rip or tear the plant material away. That leaves a very distinct, messy edge.
Got it.
Another really important clue is where the damage is happening. Initially, you'll usually see most deer damage right on the edges of the fields, those first few rows near woods or brushy cover. But if you start seeing that damage creeping further into the field away from the edges, that's a big warning sign. Why is that?
It usually means the problem is much bigger. It points to a really high deer population, one that's probably also over-browsing the natural plants in the woods and damaging the overall habitat, too. They're getting desperate.
Okay, the picture's pretty clear then. Too many deer equals serious trouble for crops, and therefore for the farmer's bottom line. So what do you actually do when your livelihood is being nibbled away? Landowners try all sorts of things, right? But the source seems to suggest most of these fixes come with their own problems. Time, money.
Yeah, it can definitely feel like you're just plugging holes in a leaky bucket. And it brings up a really important question. Can we just let nature take its course? Can natural factors control an overgrown deer population?
Like predators or disease? Exactly. But the source says, look, natural mortality deer dying of old age or accidents, It's just not enough to make a dent in a population that's already too high. And predators. Sure, coyotes, bobcats, they take some deer. But if they were capable of keeping numbers low enough to prevent major crop damage, well, they'd likely already be doing it. Their impact usually isn't enough on that scale.
Okay.
And then you have diseases like EHD, episodic hemorrhagic disease. It can be devastating to deer herds, yes, but it's sporadic, unpredictable. You absolutely can't rely on a disease outbreak as your main management strategy. It's just not consistent or controllable.
So nature's own checks and balances aren't really cutting it in these situations. What about the things people actively do? The human interventions landowners try?
Well, one of the simplest things is just more human activity. Having people around regularly walking or driving through fields, that can temporarily push deer away.
Only temporarily.
Right. It's constant work. You basically have to be out there all the time, which just isn't practical for most people as a long-term solution. Another idea is planting crops further away from tree lines or thick cover where deer like to hide.
Does that work?
The source says it can help a little, but usually the effect is pretty minimal. Deer are adaptable. If they're hungry enough and the population is high, they'll still cross open ground to get to the food.
Okay, so simple presence and field placement aren't silver bullets. That leads us to, I guess, the most direct approach. Fences. Seems logical, right? Build a wall, keep them out.
It does seem logical, and people try all sorts of high-tensile fences, electric fences, even special slanted designs to deter jumping. The goal is physical exclusion.
But there's a catch.
A huge one. The source really emphasizes this. Fencing is incredibly expensive. You got the materials, the installation, which is often professional work, and then the ongoing maintenance. Keeping fences effective against deer is not cheap.
So expensive, that.
So expensive that it can often cost more, sometimes a lot more, than the value of the crops you're losing to the deer in the first place.
Wow, so you spend a fortune to save less than you spend.
Exactly. It can be a case of the cure being worse than the disease, financially speaking. You sink all this capital, and you might still not get a positive return. It can push a landowner further into the red.
That's a really crucial point, treating one loss for potentially an even bigger cost. Okay, so if physical barriers often don't make economic sense, what about working with nature? Trying ecological approaches, improving habitat, giving deer other food options.
Yeah, that's another strategy. The idea is to try and lure deer away from your cash crops by giving them something else they like to eat. This could mean planting dedicated food plots fields just for the deer, with things like clover or brassicas, or promoting mass trees like oaks for acorns, or developing what's called early successional habitat, basically, areas with lots of young, brushy growth that deer like to browse.
So give them a buffet elsewhere.
Kind of. The hope is that if there's plenty of good food outside the crop fields, they won't bother the crops as much.
And does that work?
The source says it can help reduce the pressure, yeah. But it still takes a lot of effort, land, and resources from the landowner. You're essentially farming for the deer now, too.
Right, managing two systems.
And it doesn't necessarily fix the core problem if the population is just fundamentally too high. It might just, feed more deer.
Okay, so it's managing symptoms again, maybe. What about those special permits, depredation tags? Some states offer those, right?
They do. Depredation tags are permits that allow landowners to remove specific deer causing damage, sometimes outside the normal hunting season.
Sounds like a direct fix.
It can sound like it, but the source points out there's often, and I quote, a bunch of red tape involved.
Meaning bureaucracy.
Pretty much. Lengthy applications needing to prove significant damage first, strict limits on how many deer you can take or when. It can be cumbersome. For landowners needing quick relief, navigating all those rules makes it less practical as a primary solution.
Okay, so we've run through a lot of options here. Hoping nature fixes it, being constantly present, moving fields, building expensive fences, planting alternative food, dealing with permits. And it sounds like every single one costs significant time or money or both, and maybe doesn't even fully solve the underlying issue long term.
That's often the reality, yes.
So after all of that, is there any solution the source points to that actually works effectively and maybe, just maybe, doesn't just drain resources but could actually offer an upside? Put money back in the pocket instead of taking it out.
There is. And it's fascinating, actually, because it directly addresses the root cause we keep coming back to, deer density.
Okay.
Which is a well-managed hunting program. Specifically, leasing the hunting rights on the property.
Oh, hunting leases. How does that tackle the density issue?
Well, think about it. When deer populations are too high for the land and the crops, what you need is a way to reduce those numbers effectively and consistently. A group of responsible hunters operating under a lease agreement can do exactly that. Through planned, regulated hunting, they can bring the deer population down to a more balanced, manageable level. It's targeted population control.
And you're saying this is the solution that pays instead of costs?
That's the revolutionary part, isn't it? Think about all the other things, fencing, food plots, even your own time chasing deer. They all cost the landowner money.
Right.
But leasing out hunting rights, that generates income. You turn the problem too many deer eating your crops into a revenue stream.
So you get paid to have the deer population managed.
Precisely. The hunters pay for the privilege to hunt. They help reduce the deer numbers and therefore the crop damage.
Okay.
And the landowner gets income instead of just losses or expenses. The source presents it as a genuine win-win.
That does sound compelling. Are there other benefits besides just the money and fewer deer?
Yeah, potentially. A good lease arrangement often means you have responsible people on your land regularly. They can act as extra eyes and ears, help monitor the property, maybe even assist with other wildlife management tasks or report issues. It turns what was a liability into a managed asset that provides both ecological balance and economic return.
Okay, so let's recap this deep dive. We started with the sheer scale of the problem, that incredible appetite of millions of whitetails and how their feeding changes when populations get too high, leading to real agricultural damage. Then we walked through a whole list of common fixes, letting nature run its course, trying to scare deer away, building fences, planting diversions, getting special tags, and saw the downsides, mostly cost and limited effectiveness.
Well, right, the time, the money, the headaches.
And finally, we landed on the solution highlighted by our source, using hunting leases. A way to directly manage the deer population density while actually creating income for the landowner instead of just another bill.
Yeah, and if we connect that back to the bigger picture, crop production is obviously vital, right? Feeding the world. But wildlife management is equally critical. What this source shows is that these two things don't have to be in conflict. Done smartly, with strategies like leasing, deer management, and crop management can absolutely work together. It creates a system that's more balanced, more sustainable, and actually economically better for the farmer.
That definitely leaves us with something to think about. It poses an important question for you, the listener. How do we keep finding these kinds of innovative solutions? Solutions that don't just protect our food, but also help create a healthy ecosystem and generate economic opportunities instead of just piling on costs. It really makes you consider that interconnectedness, doesn't it? Our land, our wildlife, our livelihoods. How finding smart solutions can actually benefit all three at the same time.